Richard Aoki was born in San Leandro, California on November 20th, 1938. When Richard was just 4 years old, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066. As a result, Aoki and his Japanese American family were interned at the Topaz War Relocation Center in Utah from 1942 to 1945. After World War II, his family moved back to Oakland. Richard Aoki's life was full of dichotomies. Here, he experienced the first of many. As a toddler, young Richard, who was by any definition a U.S. citizen, was being labeled an alien. And, as a Japanese individual, he was not just estranged from his country. He was effectively told that he was unwanted on the soil he was born on, in the community he grew up in, and the society he belonged to. When he left the Topaz relocation camp, his family moved to Oakland, a city that was in the middle of a massive racial relocation. With the freeway constructions and urban renewal taking place in West Oakland, the majority of African Americans and Latinos were crammed into the eastern side. Furthermore, the Second Great Migration, as well as the migration of Mexicans to Oakland during World War II, further compressed the city. Finally, whites also came from the Jim Crow South during this time to compete for better paying jobs, and they brought their racial attitudes with them. The racial harmony that Oakland blacks had previously experienced prior to World War II was now gone. Then, in junior high school, Richard Aoki experienced his second dichotomy when he joined a gang while simultaneously achieving as a co-valedictorian. Here was a troubled young boy who grew up in a relocation camp and then in a turbulent Oakland. Furthermore, frustration and tension were the aura during his teen years. Perhaps joining a gang and becoming a good street fighter seemed necessary for Aoki to not only survive, but to fit in as well. Yet, at the same time, he expressed an ardent desire to do more. He was an intelligent individual who wanted to transform that frustration into something that was beneficial. While attending Berkeley High School, Aoki experienced his final dichotomy, but it would set the tone for the rest of his life. By this point, Richard Aoki had accumulated a criminal history. His father had become a gangster during the time Aoki lived in Oakland, and when he abandoned his family, Aoki's mother won custody of her children and moved them to Berkeley. Aoki also did well in high school, but his criminalistic tendencies never left him, for he was arrested a couple of times and was said to have beaten another student half to death. Aoki had every right to be angry at his government. As a result of his internment, the destruction it caused to his family, and his subsequent legal troubles, yet he agreed to sacrifice his life for it. After high school, Aoki joined the United States Army in order to expunge his criminal record. He would later state that joining the military was one of the most important experiences of his life. There, he became proficient with firearms and even expressed a desire to join the infantry to someday become the first Japanese American general in the United States Army. He claimed that the reason he left was because he wholeheartedly disagreed with the Vietnam War, but during his active duty he was approached by the FBI. They offered to make him an informant after they had overheard him in a wiretap building discussing his knowledge of his fellow students from high school who had communist ties. When Richard Aoki transferred from active duty to the reserves, he became immersed in various facets of the civil rights movement, largely through the FBI. The FBI, under its first director, J. Edgar Hoover, became a powerful secret empire which operated within the United States. His tactics included infiltration, burglaries, illegal wiretaps, forging documents, and spreading false rumors about key members of target organizations. Hoover became so powerful that many presidential candidates won and lost largely as a result of his opinion on them. Like many of these politicians, his most powerful weapon was the sword of anti-communism. He spied on virtually anyone and any group that had power, or posed enough of a threat to himself or to the country's fixation with anti-communism. Oftentimes, he purposefully exaggerated the threat of communism to ensure financial and public support for the FBI, especially through the program known as COINTELPRO. In 1957, when the FBI first approached Aoki, he stated that he had never held socialist or communist views, though he did admit to knowing people who were part of the Trotskyist Young Socialist Alliance. Before proceeding in recruiting him, the FBI wanted Aoki to attend the Alliance's meetings, which he did for about 7 years. The Young Socialist Alliance was a Trotskyist youth group of the Socialist Workers' Party in the United States of America. The alliance was officially established in 1960, but it did have roots going back many years prior, and it was rapidly gaining mobility within the U.S. J. Edgar Hoover was not just interested in socialism for the political leverage it offered him. The Socialist Workers' Party was of particular concern because they adopted Castroism in 1959, and they embarked on solidarity work through the Fair Play for Cuba Committee the following year. The FPCC's purpose was to provide grassroots support for the Cuban Revolution against suppression by the United States. Ever since the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, tensions between Cuba and the United States exacerbated. J. Edgar Hoover truly feared socialism's potential in the United States, and the Alliance is likely the group that the FBI wanted Aoki to help dismantle the most. He contributed greatly to the FBI, reporting on 75 security subjects. He even became a member of the SWP in 1963, called himself a revolutionary socialist, and was elected as temporary chairman of the New Socialist Discussion Club. Although Aoki openly associated himself with the SWP, it is unclear if he actually held socialist views or if he simply advanced in order to gain better information for the FBI. Yet, spending 7 years in a group undoubtedly had a strong effect on his way of thinking. Furthermore, the SWP supported the civil rights movement and the Black nationalist movement. Perhaps this could explain how he got involved in the Black Panther Party. Richard Aoki was perhaps the only non-Black member of the Black Panther Party to hold a formal leadership position, and he was friends with both Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. Bobby Seale never mentioned him directly, but he stated in his History of the Panthers there was a Japanese radical cat that had guns for a motherfucker. Aoki himself said, "I had a little collection and Bobby and Huey knew about it, so I decided to turn it over to the group." The Black Panthers were infamous for their armed citizen patrols. Oftentimes, the Black Panther Party was depicted as an out-of-control, radical organization by the media. Yet, the Panthers did not want guns because they were unruly. The organization was founded in the aftermath of the assassination of Malcolm X and of the police killing of Matthew Johnson, an unarmed black teen. They believed that the best way to ensure their survival was to arm themselves and protect each other from the police. Many of these earlier protests happened at Merritt College in Oakland, California, where Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, and Richard Aoki met as students. On this same note, Aoki may have supplied more than just weapons to the Black Panther Party. He claims that he was involved in the initial policies of the Panthers, playing at least a consultative role. Having been a member of the Socialist Workers' Party for quite some time before the founding of the Black Panther Party, Aoki would definitely have been intellectually equipped to contribute to the conversation. Furthermore, Seale stated that Newton showed Aoki a draft of the 10-point plan for his approval. However, it is also possible that Aoki contributed to the downfall of the Black Panthers. Much credit can be given to the FBI's COINTELPRO. The FBI had informants spy on the Black Panther Party. They then used this information to ignite bitter rivalries between important members, incite violence by the Panthers at protests to justify the use of gun violence against them, or to raid the homes of members. Eventually, Richard Aoki left the Black Panther Party. One reason for this is that he was enrolled in a master's program in social work at UC Berkeley. Another reason could be that he became consumed by the Third World Liberation Front. The Third World Liberation Front was an umbrella organization, constituting members from the Afro-American Students Union, the Mexican-American Student Confederation, the Native American Students United, and the Asian American Political Alliance. They engaged in a 10-week strike for ethnic studies at UC Berkeley. Richard Aoki was one of the more prominent leaders in the strike. Aoki was not just a vocal leader. He even got arrested during a strike on February 18, 1969. Nevertheless, he continued in the resistance, and the Third World Liberation Front succeeded in the founding of a Department of Ethnic Studies at UC Berkeley. We can assume that by this point, Aoki was also diverging from the FBI, for his informant was very concerned about the arrest to the point where it seemed he did not know what would happen. The informant wrote that he was worried that Aoki might spill some information about his involvement with the FBI. Furthermore, by 1976, he was no longer participating in strikes, nor was he being paid by the Bureau. He later taught ethnic courses at Berkeley and became a college counselor. In 2009, Richard Aoki died at his home in Berkeley. The story of Richard Aoki is important to remember because not only was he connected to multiple groups in the civil rights movement, his life perhaps characterizes the best tension that existed between two political factions of the 60s and 70s, the left-wing student groups and the FBI that was attempting to dismantle them by any means necessary. Since he was born, Richard Aoki's life was full of dichotomies. As a child, he was both a citizen and an alien, a valedictorian and a gang member, a member of the military and someone who resented what the military had done to the Japanese and other Asians. It is hard to imagine a better upbringing for someone who would live a double life as a radical and FBI informant. Yet, it is clear that each group he was a part of was connected, and not just through him. Socialism was the bedrock for the political objectives of the Black Panther Party and other radical groups. These groups gave leadership to the Third World Liberation Front and organizational advice to strike efficiently, and the FBI kept tabs on them all, interrupting their efforts along the way. What this narrative shows more than anything is the intensity of emotions during the civil rights movement. Young African Americans were so fearful of their lives that policing the police became their only option. The United States foreign relations were so controversial that Castroism was rapidly becoming popular and students would get themselves arrested for a Department of Ethnic Studies to be founded. The FBI was so anxious to somehow keep boiling tensions under control that they went to undemocratic measures in order to do so. The civil rights movement is often characterized by radicalism or defined by monumental acts that were passed. However, the story of Richard Aoki can give life to this crucial period by illustrating the turbulence and animosity that existed in between these important figures and that inspired these historic events.